Welcome to Plot Recon, where thrillers get tactical. I'm your host, Evan Graver. Today, I'm joined by Michael Lalonde, and I know I butchered his name because I asked him how to say it earlier, and I can't say it. So, Michael served for more than 2 decades in the Canadian Armed Forces, mostly as an intelligence officer, but before moving into politics, and now he's studying law. He's the author of the Quiet War series, which explores modern conflict, intelligence operations, and geopolitical tension through a Canadian lens. His work draws from real-world experience and focuses on contemporary threats rather than historical or speculative warfare. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much for having me.
You want to tell them how do you say your last name?
So it's pronounced properly. It's Lalonde. It's a French name. It's very difficult to say it properly. As an Anglo and as an Anglo myself, I struggle with doing it too. So
Okay.
I think the only person that I've ever heard do it properly was my father.
God bless him. It's a tough name. So you told me that you wanted to write this in this genre, and it's a tough thing to do in Canada because it's not a popular genre. So tell us how you decided to write novels, and how and where.
Yeah, so it's not even so much that it's not a popular genre per se. It's just it's a genre that simply doesn't exist. And the reason I say that is because most military thrillers, we're talking like the Tom Clancy, Jack Carr variety, and so forth, are American military thrillers. And, with the occasional British espionage thriller out there, there really hasn't ever been much in the way of Canadian military fiction at all, let alone military thrillers. But there are readers in Canada that enjoy military thrillers. It's just that they're reading about fiction that are taking place in other people's countries, and that sort of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I thought it would be interesting to start looking at creating that genre. And so when I started taking a closer look, I realized there was one other guy writing military fiction for Canada. His name is R.A. Flanagan. He wrote the Kanzuk at War series. So it's a little different than mine because his is speculative. He looks a little bit into the future and a civil war within the United States, and that's the context in which his story develops. And he was the only show and tell. And so now that I've entered the field, and it's a traditional military thriller in the sense that it's not speculative, it's very much based on the real world that we live in today, so far as is possible. And so I thought there was an opportunity to fill that niche because it didn't exist. I think that there's an appetite for it. And over the last couple of years, we've seen a spike in patriotism in Canada that we just haven't seen before. Certainly not for a long time. Ironically, because of our best friends to the South, the Americans. There's nobody that can unite us better than an American can, and so it's a very odd and complex quagmire that that seems to get us motivated and riled up. But so I wanted to, I've wanted to write something like this for a long time. It's just, I was in the Army for 23 years, and so that took precedence. It's pretty tough to write a military thriller if you're a current serving military intelligence officer. That just wouldn't really work so well. When I got out of the Army, I ended up straight into politics. So same thing, right? Just time and space and whatnot. Then I got into law, and I'm going to be finishing my law degree this year. Not a great time to write a book either, but probably, comparatively speaking, a better time than other times were. And so I thought, you know what, I'm feeling the itch. It's time to sit down and get this done. And once I started, then I just couldn't stop. And so, in terms of writing process, if you wanted to get into some of the technicals there. So the funny part is that I had no idea how to write a book. Right? I had no idea what I was doing. And so I started it in the summertime of, was it 2024? I'm writing. I thought I had a really great story, but I was like, I really don't know if I'm writing this very well. I have no clue what to do. And so I go on YouTube and I try to start, being self-taught. And there are a lot of female authors on YouTube, God bless them, that are willing to talk about how to write. And the vast majority of them, of course, are all romance authors. And so I'm learning how to write now from a very specific source and a very specific style. And so it's like, I don't know if that might be the best fit for like a military thriller, right? I was like, maybe I'm doing something wrong here. And so I looked into it further. I actually started attending classes at night above and beyond law school to learn the craft. And then I realized, oh God, what have I done? And I shared a very early writing sample with a classmate, and she had said, like, why are all your characters so romancy like? And I was like, oh God, what have I done? And so the process was, I had no process. I had no clue what I was doing. And so threw that all in the garbage, started from scratch. And I tried to outline, I really did. It didn't work. I came up with a very broad, basic premise for a story, but I just didn't follow the outline after that. It wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. But what I did do is spend a lot of time developing these characters. After that criticism that my characters all sounded way off, right? I was like, okay, I really don't want that. I'm going to really nail all these characters down. So now I had characterization in my head and on paper, great detail. And so I would start a chapter, and I'd say, well, I know what chapter one, I know what I want it to do. I have no idea how it's going to get there. And it's almost like the characters kind of take over, right? Because it's like, well, no, he wouldn't do that in this case. That's not how he would talk, and so I feel like, when I'm writing, I have a front row seat to the action unfolding, like I'm a spectator in a sense, which makes it a lot more fun, I think. But the problem then, of course, is once you're done, you have an unwieldy manuscript that ended up being, in my case, 250,000 words long. And so I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? I sent that, to an editor to say, okay, let's work on that. And she's like, yeah, that's way too long. And so she had all these story arcs that she wanted me to cut out. And one in particular, and I was like, oh no, I can't lose that. And so my girlfriend had said, well, why don't you repackage that whole arc and make it book one instead of the book that you just wrote, because you're never going to get this edited down in time to release. And that's what I did. And so my process, to make a very long story short, is if you picture, somebody standing at the top of a mountain and slipping on a piece of ice and then tumbling all the way down the mountain and smashing into every ditch and tree trunk along the way, and then miraculously, bouldering across the finish line and not dead. That was my process. I'm going to make some refinements to the process moving forward, but that's essentially, I think it's a great example of what no one else should try to do. Don't do what I did, but that is what I did, and it worked out quite well, because that new arc, or so the arc that had to be cut, that I repackaged into its own story to be book one of The Quiet War, ended up becoming a great hit. And so it just all worked out.
It is a great hit. I was looking at your Amazon numbers. You're 2, 3, and 4, and your 3 categories. So people are buying your books, and you're doing really well on Kobo too, which for our listeners is a Canadian service that's basically like Amazon.
Yeah, it was really surprising. Like within a week, I had hit #1 bestseller in political fiction. And then within, a couple of weeks after that, I was actually at #1 in all 3 of the categories: war fiction, spy, and tales of intrigue, and political fiction. And it moves up and down now depending on the day. It sort of moves around, but yeah, so it's hit #1 in those 3 categories, and conspiracy thrillers for a little while before Amazon decided that they were going to move me out of there. And stuff. So now I'm chasing after the big prize, which is the military thriller category. And my book has been #2 there for a week. I think it just dropped down to 3 today. So we'll see if we can cross the threshold. But I mean, and these are just sort of silly things that, keep me checking my stats every day or whatever. But overall, it's been very, very well received. The reviews have been strong, but not just that. The comments that I'm getting on all the Facebook ads I've been launching. I mean, I've got one that's got over 5,000 likes and several hundred comments and shares, and the overwhelming majority of them have been extremely positive, which has been really encouraging.
I was just going to ask you what you thought that driver was, whether it was just the Canadian aspect of it, or was it the hard marketing that you've been doing?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, right? Because on the first thing, and I'm no veteran as a book writer or marketer by any means, but I think common sense applies here. It's that old adage that if a tree falls and there's nobody to hear it, does it really make a sound? right? And so if you write a book and nobody knows it's there, is it going to get read or is it going to get purchased? And the answer is an obvious no. And I think that's, a mistake that a lot of authors make is like, I can write this book, put my heart and soul into it, as long as there's heart and soul, because everybody likes to talk about that part. And then they throw it up on Amazon and nobody's buying it. It might be the best book that's ever been written, but if you don't know that it's there, nobody's gonna buy it, right? Unless you're already a mega name or something like that, and I'm not, right? I'm a collective, a relative nobody, and so the advertising is what got it in front of people. I think that the timing and the patriotic wave is what really got it to take off, because what ended up happening is I got the readers that I thought I was going to get, which was a lot of middle-aged men that are interested in military thrillers and that kind of thing, right? And so I did get them, but a funny thing happened that I wasn't anticipating. I ended up with a whole pile of middle-aged women and older, and in many cases significantly older, buying the book, commenting on it, and really pushing it and getting behind it in a way that I just never thought was going to happen, because traditionally you don't tend to see that, right? There was one comment. It was from a senior lady. She said, I'm over 80 years old. I've got cataracts, but come hell or high water, I'm going to find a way to read this book. And, and she did. And I know she did, because then she commented on it later, and she'd obviously known what was going on in the story. And so I was just blown away by that. It was warmly received by the niche that I was targeting, but also above and beyond that by people that I just never would have thought would have been into that book. And so I learned that lesson too, is that, niche targeting is important, but don't count out other folks, because there's a good chance that you can bring readers into that genre, which I think has started now. And that's also one of the reasons why I'd like to see other authors moving in there too, because the more authors we have that are contributing to that genre, the more readers we'll have, and then of course the more success collectively for everybody.
Now, your book takes place partially in Belize, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So are you keeping it, as an former intelligence officer, are you keeping an eye on that Central America, Venezuela situation? Is that part of your writing?
I'm keeping an eye on everything. It's part of my daily routine. I said once an intelligence officer, always one. I'm a voracious consumer of news, geopolitical news, every day for years and years, and I don't ever see that changing. And so I'm certainly well aware of things that have been developing in Venezuela. In terms of the story, and this was something that was baked into the story already, the bigger story that hasn't launched yet. I actually just put that on pre-order now. It's called Alpha 1. It's basically the original book 1 that essentially now becomes book 2. And in that book, there's some, I wrote that in 2024 before we had a lot of souring political nonsense between Canada and the United States. And I call it nonsense because it is. I think our two countries have been close friends for ever, and we will continue to be despite the current hiccups now. And so that's why I'm not all that overly fazed by it, but I am in the minority here, right? Like I clearly do not speak for anybody else when I say that, and anybody else north of the border is probably gonna have something different to say. But in 2024, the climate was different, and so there is portions of that story where you could see a very close, intimate bond between Canada's JTF-2 and the U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6, or DevGru. And that's based on reality, right? Mm-hmm. Like those two units, and also Delta Force, SAS, they've all worked together multiple times on, and they have a good rapport and stuff. And so that was baked into the story. And so I'm showing JTF2 as being really close friends to these American operators, in a few certain scenes. And so naturally the Americans want to jump in and help with the crisis of the day, which isn't going to work for various political reasons that I build into the book, because I'm trying to show, hey, here's what Canada can do if we really, really had to do this for the most part by ourselves, kind of thing, right? And so the SEAL team leader in the book he's really upset by this, and he's like, I want to go, right? And we want to go, this isn't right, and all that stuff. And the admiral that's there, who's leading U.S. SOCOM at the time, says, I get it, I want to help too, but there's other ways we're going to help. And we're going to help by going into Central America and putting an end to this opioid crisis. And so if you read Canadian Front, which is the first book that I just released, the grand architect and central antagonist has essentially hatched a plan that is meant to destroy Canada as a first step in a wider campaign to get to the United States. So rather than going after the US first and risking getting Americans united against a common enemy once again, like Osama bin Laden did, he prefers to allow the Americans to continue with their internal strife, right? Let's go after the periphery. And the early stage of his plan is let's collapse Canada's healthcare system because that's a source of national pride, right? And so the most effective way to destroy Canada, if as far as this fictitious bad guy is concerned, is to take away that which they hold dear because it's that important to them. And so by flooding opioids and fentanyl into Canada, ironically, it's kind of the opposite of what the Americans are accusing us of doing, but it's coming from Central America, right? And so by the end of the book, we see that so Canada's won the tactical battle. It's a glorious victory, but we've still lost because we didn't really see the battle for what it was. And so the country's healthcare system is starting to collapse. And so when we go into book 2, which is the one that I'm pushing out the door now, that's where the Admiral says, we can't help them on this mission, but we do have a mandate to go after narco-terrorists, right? And so they're going to go into Central America, not Venezuela. That wasn't something that I had envisioned at the time. And I think to write that now wouldn't make any sense because, it's just already happened anyways. And so writing some fiction about something that's already happened then kind of almost becomes like a, modern historical fiction. So the story is still going to be in Central America, particularly in Mexico, where this is where the Quiet War moves into another theater of operations. And what I mean by theater of operations is now this is the American story in the Quiet War, because the Quiet War is not going to just be a Canadian story, although it largely will be. There are installments that will deal with this. And so book 2 is Alpha 1. It's a direct continuation on the Canadian story. And then probably the next book coming after that will be the version where the Americans are going into Central America to deal with the drug problem. And it's kind of it serves self-interest at the same time too. They're helping us within the context of the story, but they're also helping themselves because drug trafficking is a massive problem for both of our countries because of what's going on in Central America. And so the Admiral sort of crafts that in a way that says, hey, we can do this, and we're helping them and we're helping us too. And that's what makes it fly politically. And so then we get to see the Quiet War unfolding as the Americans are fighting it. And there's another story that's already laid out that brings the battle to the British as well. And so they're going to also have an installment that's very focused on them. And then towards the end of the series, it's all going to come together where we finally get unified in a Western effort, now that we realize what the hell's going on, in a Western effort to put an end to this mastermind and his conspiracy once and for all sort of thing. So that's the overall architecture of it.
Do you, as you're writing this or have written it, are you seeing things play out in the news that are very similar to what you've written?
Well, yes and no. I'm in many respects, I'm seeing things play out that I hadn't anticipated, right? And so the political intrigue that's baked into the book that I'm putting out the door now, which will come out in December 2026, is based on Canadian politics in 2024, because that's when I wrote it. And that's just not the reality today. That prime minister's gone. We have a new prime minister from the same party who's now gone in a totally different direction and stuff. And so I'm sitting there going, damn. And then, of course, by the time my story comes out, we're in a very antagonistic phase of the Canadian-American relationship, which I didn't anticipate either.
So let me drop a question in right here, because we're talking about this relationship. We've seen a lot of rumors about Alberta wanting to succeed. What's your take on that?
Well, they're not going anywhere. There's certainly there's a small minority that want to, and there's no doubt about it. And I think the thing that people have to be cognizant of there is that those who scream the loudest on social media are the ones that are heard and nobody else. And it creates a false perception, right? And that is a theme that I, not specifically related to that issue, but in a broader sense, a theme that is the central crux of the Quiet War, because our mastermind in the Quiet War doesn't wield massive armies of tanks and airplanes and nuclear weapons. He wields information, and he creates illusions, invents realities, and he tells people stories that they are desperate to hear. He knows what makes them weak, and he feeds them with that which they need to feel validated in the worst possible way, right? And so that's like sort of a broader theme that I did anticipate. But getting back to the Alberta thing, there is a small minority there, and I'm not unsympathetic to their plight. I share their frustrations. They are right to be upset and to be hopping mad. The rest of the country, in my view, has turned its back on Alberta for at least the last 10 years, if not more. And it all comes down to a simple truth. Alberta has oil. The rest of the country does not, at least not to the same degree. So it's not important to us. It's important to them. And under Justin Trudeau, it was important to talk about our virtues of climate change. And so, the government of the day was happy to see an entire province go down in anguish because it supported their political narrative. And if you're an Albertan, you're going to say, screw that, right? But thankfully, the vast majority of Albertans have are made of much sterner stuff. They are patriotic Canadians, and they're not going anywhere. So the idea of, in reality, Alberta separating from Canada, I think is a non-starter. I think there's no conceivable reality in the next 50 years where that actually happens, but it's going to get talked a lot about. But
Make for a good
that's
book.
not going to happen. It could if I wanted to go down there. That's not really what the series is doing right now. So the series is more geopolitical as it is, like a internal cultural examination. I did that on purpose because as a former politician and somebody who is very deeply tied to this, like I get too emotional about this. Like if I started writing books now about that, like it would just not be, I think, a good experience for me. And it's just not the right time for that. It might be something I look at a little bit later when I'm in a position where I can be more zoomed out and a little more dispassionate and I think that might make a better story. But if I were to try to put too much of that into it now, I would just be one really angry person writing. And when you're angry and you're writing, like you're going to come up with a different product, right? And it's not really the product I'm interested in right now. We've torn ourselves apart enough, and we're still doing it. And I don't think that me adding stuff in there to further damage the fault line is beneficial, right? And so, so I think but it's also, the other thing is that Canadians are not unaware of that reality, right? Like Canadians are tracking what's going on in Canada. What they are not doing is tracking necessarily in a fair and accurate way what's going on in the rest of the world. Certainly not vis-a-vis the United States, and certainly not geopolitical affairs, right? So I'm writing a piece now, it's nonfiction, it's like an essay I'll put up on a Substack shortly, arguing why Canada finally needs its own foreign human intelligence agency. Why are we a sovereign country of the size and scope that we are, but yet we're so special that we don't have one of these agencies, or we don't need one? And I think that's complete and utter nonsense, right? And so those are types of things, where Canada doesn't have its eye on the ball. A lot of Canadians have probably never heard of JTF2, for example, which is our Tier 1 Special Operations Unit that takes the lead in my story. And so I'm trying to plug those gaps. I'm trying to bring awareness to the fact that Canada is not this perfectly safe place with no enemies, no adversaries, and no threats, because it's just Not true. As someone who has worked on the inside, whose job it was to track threats, it is not true. There are threats, they are real, and the only reason why we haven't paid dearly for it is because we have gotten lucky, and those few people that we do employ in national security have done an outstanding job. But it's not fair to continue to ask those few people to do the job of a great many people, right? And so we need to start taking that more seriously. And that is a priority for me that I think, through fiction, I'm well placed to try to deliver. And then at the same time, for American and British readers and other fans around the world of the genre, it's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Canada and see that, we're not so different at the end of the day. We have far more in common with one another than we don't. But there are some differences, and they're nuanced, and they're the types of differences I think that when looked at, enrich relationships and will enrich an overall understanding. And so that's, the priority for me with The Quiet War. Once I wrap that series up, and I haven't decided how long the series will be, then it'll be, then we can, talk again about, what'll be next. And we'll see if I look at hammering too hard on the internals things differently at that point.
Well, there's an old joke here in the U.S. military about Canadian Special Forces, and that is that part of their selection is to learn how to say sorry in every language.
I don't think that happens during selection, and I can't say that I've personally been there to witness it, but I do know enough of the very hard individuals that have gone through that process. There's no saying sorry.
No, to be a tier 1 operator, you have to have a lot of moxie and to be able to withstand the training and the punishment and all that.
Yeah, it is very, very similar from what I understand. And again, I can't, say it from that, a direct witness perspective. But from what I understand, that the training and the hell and the suffering that they go through is very similar.
Yep.
To what you see in your SHIELD units in the United States. But more to that joke, the funny thing is, you want to know who the most friendliest, polite people are. It's not Canadians. My good God, try living in downtown Toronto or Montreal where everybody says, fuck you. Like that's a myth. The friendliest and politest people are actually Americans from the South. Like, when you go to the deep South, I mean, my God, even the introverts are extroverts, and, the introverts are outgoing and will come and welcome you and say hello and, and that kind of stuff. You don't see that anywhere else. And yeah, like that, the whole polite thing and the we're just nice people is, I mean, it's a myth, right? We are not bad people by any stretch of the imagination. We're not super mean and, evil people. We are people, just like you, just like the British, just like everybody else. We all have our nuances and our different ticks and things like that. But
so let's pull this back into the publishing realm. You told me that you started North Vanguard Press to publish your own books, but that you want to bring more authors like you who want to write this traditional military genre through the Canadian lens.
Yeah, and so not necessarily through the Canadian lens, but that would certainly be a focus. So when I created North Vanguard Press when I was considering my publishing options, right? And so as we talked about before the show started, because military thrillers and such are simply not a genre that exists in Canada, in that Canadian authors are writing Canadian stories, I didn't see a good way forward there with querying and going through all that. And I'm entrepreneurial anyways, right? And I thought at the end of the day that I could probably sell my book better than somebody else could. And so I created North Vanguard Press with the intent of launching my books, but also with the intent of getting others into the genre. So they don't have to be Canadian authors, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a Canadian story, because at the end of the day, Canadian readers are going to need a broad spectrum of views to be able to get a holistic picture of what's going on around the world, right? So it's the idea of bringing to Canada the types of stories that publishers are simply not doing right now, either because they don't want to or because nobody's writing them. things like that. And so to start with, because you can't build an empire overnight, it would be looking at, military thriller authors, newer authors that have great stories that just can't seem to find a way to make it through, that don't want to self-publish, and it'll start that way. The end state, though, and this is where it's problematic, because to pull this off, my books have to do so well that they bring in so much money that I have now money to spend to actually run a real publishing shop. Because right now I don't have anything to offer anybody, right? I can't do editing for you. I can't do any of that stuff. The only thing I can do is say, you can put my name, my publisher's name on your book, and the only thing I'll take from you is that I've got your name on my website, sort of thing, as a starting point, right? Which is a good idea for a very certain type of person. But as that grows, then the idea would be to bring on a full-time staff of editors that will provide all those same services that a traditional publisher would. The difference being is that we start telling stories that nobody is telling. And when I say nobody is telling, what I really mean by that is nobody is publishing in the traditional sphere unless you're a big, gigantic name like a Jack Carr or something like that. Clearly, those people are doing quite well, and they have a mass following for good reason. They are putting out outstanding products. But I think it shows that there's room for more, and for whatever reason, the traditional publishing universe, that's just not where they are. And that's not where they want to be, I don't think. And so there's a significant opportunity to move in there and do traditional publishing better than traditional publishers do it. But that's a long way off, right?
Yeah.
So baby steps.
So what are you doing right now? You said you're running ads on Facebook. What else are you doing to market your books?
So it's been a combination of things. So the big part, I think running ads is one way to say it. What I would say is I've been carpet bombing the internet with Facebook ads. So there's a better way, I think, to do that, because I'm probably spending more than I need to be spending to get the same amount of results, right? And that just speaks to the fact that I don't have yet those skills and experience to be that refined. The marketing team that I brought on board, for example, they're still spending my money, but they spend way less of it, and they're getting better results. And so I kind of like to try to just still compete against my own people, just to see how it goes, just because it makes life more fun. But so there's been a lot of that. What that company did that I couldn't do for myself was Amazon ads. I tried and failed miserably at those. I just couldn't get anywhere. And so they know what they're doing. They've put together something there. It's working really well. So that's been very helpful. They also put together an entire program to get ARC reviews. I was nowhere on that front, so they got really good ARC reviews coming in for launch. And that made a big difference, because when there was no reviews, it was like, okay, there's some sales, right? Then, even when there was 2 or 3 reviews, which is really not many, all of a sudden the sales ballooned and really took off. And so those two things, a lot of the keyword research and stuff. So basically it's been a full court press, right? So it's not just Facebook ads. That's just the only part that I can take credit for, but even then, not as much credit as they can take, right? And so I was in a bit of a unique position compared to other first-time authors, the vast majority of which can't afford to spend on advertising at all, let alone pay a firm to help you with it, right? So I am in a very fortunate position there, and that has clearly contributed to success for me where it may not have for other people.
Well, what are you finding that works for you on Facebook?
So I did one ad.
You like static?
Right at launch.
Are you doing like static ads or reels or
So it's literally just, so when the book launched, I put together one ad. I've had other ads before and they were so-so, but when the book launched, there was an ad, and it's a graphic. It's got me still in uniform from 10 years ago, in the CAD pad camouflage uniform, big Canadian shoulder patch kind of thing, with the background and a picture, a 3D model of the book, and the caption is, I think, Canada's military thriller, or Tom Clancy meets Canadian grit, something like that. And
Okay.
then in the ad copy, I just tell a little bit of story. I say, I used to be an intelligence officer. Now I'm doing this. Here's a bit about the story. Come buy the thing. And that just took off. So in term, it was put together to generate traffic and sales. That was how I built it.
Hmm.
It's done that, but it's also been like a lightning rod of engagement too. So because like I said, there's been over 5,000 likes that came in on that, which has been one of my strongest ads to date in the engagement front. Hundreds and hundreds of comments, most of which are talking about the book, how they're going to buy it, or they liked it.
Hmm.
So it's done really, really well there. And I've had it sitting there forever since December 9th. It's still there now. I've done a other couple of smaller variations as separate ones, but that's been the big one. But I think it's run its course because it's not delivering the same results now. So I think, there might be a little bit of ad fatigue. So I'm going to have to look at something different. My marketing team, by contrast, what they've done is just a very sharp, snappy graphic of the book cover. And they only have like one line and it says like 5 stars. And it's like a direct half sentence quote from a review that we got from an ARC reader. And that's been doing really well. And I'm like, man, I put all this work and all this other stuff into this thing. But sometimes simple is better, right? And,
Yeah.
and so
So what does your funnel look like? You're feeding Amazon and you're feeding Kobo. So are you
yeah.
letting the ad agency run Amazon and you're doing Kobo?
So I've got two big ones going, and so the big one, the first one I just mentioned, has the Amazon link attached to it, and then I have another one where it's Parliament in the background, no picture of me, picture of the book, and some text and stuff. And that one's done really well too. And I put a books to read link there, which is a universal link. So it's a link that brings you to all the places that you can buy my book, including Kobo and now Indigo on their website, which is your version of Barnes and Noble. It's
Yeah.
also on Barnes and Noble and all that. So it's published very wide. And so I have that link there. And it's had some success, but I would say like 80% of my sales are happening on Amazon. And I'm making better money per sale on Amazon too when it comes to print copies. Ebooks is pretty much the same
Yeah.
across the board, right?
Yep.
So I would say probably about 10% of, so if we want to just look at ebooks to compare apples to apples, 10% of the ebooks have, I want to say 10-15% have been on Kobo, another 10% have been Apple Books, and then a very tiny amount on Google Play. And then on print books, the overwhelming majority have gone through Amazon, with a very small handful going through, and it's just starting to pick up, going through Indigo and Barnes and Noble for American readers.
Yeah.
And that's just because it's only landed on those vendors recently. So Amazon is still very much the clear channel. My marketing firm is only doing Amazon stuff. I've been doing some of the other things. And that's the real challenge with going wide is that you have to pay a lot more in advertising, because you have to advertise Amazon, you have to advertise Kobo, and so on and so on. Kobo doesn't have the same military thriller readership that Amazon does, so that's been a problem there. If you look at the audiobook, for example, I've got at least a couple of hundred in the past month on Audible and 2 on Kobo, right? And so a few months from now, when the 90 days has passed, if that persists, well, I would be a lunatic for staying wide, right? So I will most likely flip the switch and go exclusive with Audible, because that gets 99% of
Are you thinking
of
about?
the sales.
You just said go into, exclusive with Audible. Are you thinking about going to exclusive with KU too, or will you
Not
stay
right
wide?
now, no. I hem and haw about that. I've spoken to another military thriller author who's kind of at, a little further in their writing career than I am. And I asked, how much have you made off of, page reads and such on one book for 1 month? Because that's what I have as a base of comparison, right? And so he told me, he said, I've made $6,000 for the whole year of 2025, but that's off all books, and I think he's got either 3 or 4, right? And so when I look at that and I compare to my ebook sales outside of Amazon, I'm at $1,500 worth of royalties just for a month and a half, right?
Yeah.
So if that persists, and I did the math, selling an ebook at $4.99 will get me about $3.40, I think. And if somebody does it on Kindle Unlimited and they read it every single page, it's about 90 cents.
Yeah.
Right,
It's crazy,
based on the
right?
length of the book. So you make a lot more money on the sales. The counter argument is, well, yeah, but if it's free to those people that are already paying their $9.99, then they'll just download it and there you go. But when I look at myself, I mean, I've downloaded all kinds of KU books onto my Kindle and I still haven't read them yet, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, but the ones that I've paid for, I read those things, right? It's I don't when I buy a book, I read a book, and so. I'm still torn. So there's the economics of it, which is to say that even though Kobo is not performing as well as I'd like it to see, it's still performing well enough that it would beat those page reads. And it's got its own Kobo Plus, which is
Yeah.
the same as KU. And I don't know what I've got there because their reporting on that lags behind. So I have no clue what that looks like. And I need to wait to see what those numbers are, if any,
Yeah.
before I make that decision. But
That is
I
one
would
bad thing
say,
about Kobo is they have abysmal reporting.
yes,
But their Kobo Plus is like Amazon KU, but they let you be wide. And they're not demanding
exactly. And
exclusivity.
it really is. It's a much Kobo Plus is a much better offering for authors than KU is,
Yeah.
hands down. The weakness is simply that they don't have the same volume of readers there, and they don't have a lot of military thriller readers there. There are some because
Yeah.
I've gotten some sales there for sure.
I
And
sell a lot of books on Kobo.
yeah, but it hasn't reached the same traction. So if you've sold a lot of books on Kobo, then you might maybe be able to tell me what you've done there because I've gotten some, but it's not where I want to be. So there's still work to be done
It's
on that front.
You're just driving traffic to it. It's the same way you're driving traffic to Amazon. You got to take advantage of some of the sales that they have, but then you're discounting a book or whatever. But
Yeah,
you get the sale, you get the first sale on the first book, and then you're hoping for that read through that people will keep buying deep into the series.
yeah, that will certainly help when I have read through to offer, which is
Yeah,
why. So I've got, and that's the other sort of quagmires right now. So I put Alpha 1 up for pre-order on Amazon so far. It's going to come up on Kobo and stuff too. I just have to take the time to sit down and do it. Most of my readers are buying print copies, right? Which
yeah.
is odd because I would have expected that for a new self-published author like myself, most books would be ebook sales, which seems to be the industry trend. But that hasn't been the case. Like between say 75% of my royalties have come from print books, between the paperback and hardcover combined. And then
That's kind of an anomaly because I don't see that. I have all my books are in paperback, and I don't get anywhere near that percentage. But I see most of the
yeah, and
ebooks
I
are.
kind of saw it coming because I had Canadian Front on pre-order for a while too, and everybody was like, "Well, how do I get the print one?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Like, I can't do it that way, right?" And so now I've put it up on pre-order, and it's only available for pre-order as an ebook. And I'm worried I might have upset some of my readers because they're like, "I can't find the ebook. Where is it?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you have to wait until December when it actually launches." Because so far as I know, there isn't a way to put a book on
Pre-order
pre-order
on.
on Amazon like a
Right.
print book, right?
Yeah.
And Kobo doesn't do that. I actually just sent Kobo a message yesterday asking them if they would consider doing self-publishing with print books as well, because there's just no Canadian option for that, right?
Yeah.
There literally is none. And so there are some Canadians that want to buy from a Canadian company and they will not touch Amazon, but they want their print books. So now it's available on Indigo through Ingram Spark, but it takes about 2 weeks, right? Whereas Amazon can get you the exact
Yeah.
same thing, same quality in 24 hours. So it makes it rough. So that's another area of opportunity, I think, in Canada that exists. There's a big area to fill because no one's doing it, right?
Well, you can. Well, there's another option there for you. I mean, if you wanted to order a giant batch from Ingram Spark or and then let them sit at your house and you can self-fulfill those orders. You can
Yeah,
do,
that would be tough for right now, given
yeah,
everything else I have going on. I am gonna put up a Shopify store for small inventory where I will sell autographed copies at the same price that you can buy anywhere else. So there won't be any extra fee. The only catch is, of course, you'll have to pay for delivery
yeah,
because of that. But so I'm gonna start small that way. I don't know that it would be a great idea to get like thousands of them. I don't know where I would put them in my condo, first of all, and my girlfriend would probably throw me out, and that's where the books would go, is, my half of the bed or something.
yeah,
So right now it's not realistic. But the other problem, and I'm sure you know, right, this is that dynamic with Ingram Spark, is that so they will funnel your book to all the bookstores across the world, which is great. And so they take their cut. You've got to offer a significant discount to the store. So
yeah,
say when Indigo takes my book into their store, they're going to get 45% of the sale price, right? So at the end of the day, I might get like $2 on a sale. If I sell that same book on Amazon, I get $8,
yep,
right? So it's a totally different dynamic. The the benefit with Indigo is, if you're in all of Indigo, is that you're going to get a pile of sales without necessarily having to drive a lot of those same ads. You'd still do ads, but not in the same way. But as you know, what they don't sell, they're going to return, right?
yes,
And you set it as a return destroy. So the books get returned and destroyed, but someone still has to pay for the printing, and that someone is the author. So let's say it went to the whole country, and Indigo's like, yeah, all right, Mike, let's thousands of books across the country, and they don't all sell. I could end up getting a bill that's much larger than the royalties that I might have earned from the sales. And so that's the scary point for me. And because I'm just starting out, I don't have the experience with that to see, well, just how many people are going to buy that way. I just don't know. I've got one store in Toronto that's agreed to carry it on the shelf. So it'll take about 4 weeks to get there. We'll see how it goes. Then, there's a lot of
yeah.
stores in Toronto, so I can go visit them and get the same and build out slowly, and we'll see how it goes. And if that goes well, then, I might look at something different with Alpha One in, taking on a big order and then just, maybe doing consignment to stores and things like that. But baby steps again,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
you have to not bankrupt yourself in the process if you want to keep writing these things.
I've never had anybody ask me to pre-order the paperback.
If you look at the post I just put on my Facebook page yesterday, there's a handful of people asking about that, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, yeah, and then they don't reply, right? I'm like, oh no, I shouldn't have put it up on pre-order yet.
That's
Yeah, it's a lot easier, as you know, to get your book formatted into an ebook. Like through Vellum, it takes me 5 minutes, and the software does it for me. But I have an interior designer for the print book, and she puts a lot of time and effort to get everything set, and then the final proofreading and all that. And you don't really, that's not as a concern for the ebook, because you don't even have to upload the manuscript. You just have to make sure it's there before it goes live, and so that's that other dynamic.
if you have a Shopify store, you can hook to Lulu or one of the other print-on-demand services, and then order books. You could just order books through them and then just self-distribute.
Yeah. I was looking at Book Vault for the Shopify
Yeah.
thing to see. So we'll see how that goes. Experimenting with that now with the current book. So yeah, I mean, I'm still very much, as you can see, a novice when it comes to some of these things, right? Like I've got a couple of things I think on lockdown that I know really well, but there's still a broader part of the world that I have to get into. So once I finish up law school, I have, in Canada, it's like 10 months of articling. It's like an apprenticeship you have to do, basically working as a lawyer under supervision, for lack of a better term. So after that 10 months, then I would be formally licensed as a lawyer. And at that point, then I'm a free man.
Yeah.
So then I can, take cases as I feel like it, because I won't go work for a firm. I'll just open up my own shop, and, it'll just be something that I do because I enjoy it, and to bring in some money, as opposed to making a full-time gig. But I'll have a lot more time to really step on the gas on the publishing side by that point, and look into it and stuff. And so I'm anxious to see, what can be done there, because I think ultimately as good as Amazon has been to me, and Amazon has been very good to me. So I'm very loath to criticize them because they've
Well,
been
they're
good.
good to everybody
And
because
yeah, and so it is what it is, right? But they hold an overwhelming amount of power,
yeah.
and the horror stories that you see all the time, where there's a mix-up with a copyright or author drama, and then someone goes and says, "No, that's my book," and then well, they just take it all down, and then you're finished, and just stupid stuff like that. I think it gives every author pause, right? And so I think ultimately I want to be in a position to be doing sales direct at some point. But I want to be able to do it in a way where it's still the same value offer insofar as it's possible as what a
Yeah.
customer is going to get if they just ordered it on Amazon. Because otherwise I'm saying, hey, buy from me, pay more, and get less service, right? And that's a tough pill. Some people will do it for sure, but I don't think you're going to get everybody on board that way. So there's work to be done there, and I think, but from an entrepreneurial point of view, that's where there's room for. I have some entrepreneurial capacity, but not enough on my own to pull off a venture like that. And so, if there are people out there that are interested and want to throw down, feel free to reach out. And those are discussions that can be had, and things like that.
So my last question for you is, what do you want people to take away from your books at the end of the day?
I want them to understand that Canada has a very real and fantastic tier one capability. It's serious, it kicks ass, and the work that they do day in and day out, whether you hear about it in the news or not, is happening anyway, and it fucking matters. And you need to be cognizant of it, be supportive of it, and know that it's not just all the glory that you see in the movies and a lot of the other books. One of the things that I do very differently, and you'll really see it in this one coming, in Alpha 1, is the cost of war on the individual operator. It is horrific, and it's devastating, and it's invisible, and nobody sees it. We lose more people to suicide than we lose to combat-related deaths. And that's both a testament to how amazing our operators are, but equally so a testament to how bad of a job our society does at wrapping its arms around these men when they come home and making sure that that type of eventuality doesn't take place, right? And so that's that final takeaway, is that those jokes about the Canadian military, the pessimism, I get it. Enough. Shut up already. Read the book, see for yourself what can be done, and respect the people that are doing this, and take it seriously. And especially now, for a country like Canada who is very sensitive about its sovereignty, and not for bad reason. I'm in many respects, fair enough. But if you're sensitive about sovereignty, then engage with things that allow your sovereignty to exist in the first place. And these books are the closest you're going to get to ever understanding, because the real stories are classified and cannot be told, right? And that, I get it. There's a good reason for that. But at the same time, there's a gap that needs to be bridged. And hopefully, my book will bridge that gap for people that are reading these stories.
That is perfect. So thank you, Michael, for coming on and talking to me on Plot Recon about your series, The Quiet War, and how you've published them and your success with publishing. And if this episode hit the mark, share it, leave it, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. And as always, swing over to my site, evangraver.com. Grab some field gear to support Plot Recon, and check out Michael's work on all the platforms. He's wide, and he's got his own website, which I'll put up on the podcast. So check that out. I'm Evan Graver. Thanks for listening. Stay sharp, write hard, and keep your fiction tactical.